Cry Baby. Margaret was 47 years old, and even though she hated to admit it, she was still afraid to be home alone at night. Her husband Peter had gone out of town for the week, which meant that she had 7 nights of quiet anxiety ahead of her. It was, however, not as bad as it used to be. Peter knew of her fears, and being a good husband, he got her a faithful pet Doberman, which she had named Buster. Buster made Margaret feel much better about being alone. He would lay at her feet while she sat in her favorite rocking chair, knitting away in front of the fire. That evening, a rainstorm had moved in. It was cold and miserable outdoors, but Margaret and Buster were cozy and content by the fire. After working on her knitting project for a while, Margaret decided that a cup of tea would be lovely. She left the sleeping Buster by the comfort of the fireplace to make her way into the kitchen to begin heating the kettle. The wind howled outside the kitchen window and made her shudder. It was getting awfully bad out there. Just as she was about to head back into the living room, she heard a faint noise. She froze for a moment to try to get a better listen. Just then, it happened again. She could have sworn she heard a baby crying. She rushed up to the kitchen window and cupped her hands against the glass for a better look out into the inky blackness. But there was nothing there. She honestly didn't expect to see anything, though. I mean, after all, what would a baby be doing out at an hour like this in the middle of a rainstorm? She eventually decided that it was just the howling wind playing a trick on her mind and went back to her bedroom to fetch a blanket to snuggle under. She hit the light switch and made her way back into the closet where she kept her linen and blankets. Right as she was reaching for the soft fleece blanket, she heard it again. This time, it was coming from outside her bedroom window. It sounded like a crying baby for sure. She set the blanket down on the bed and made her way over to the window once more. Again, she peeked out into the darkness and saw nothing. The crying had stopped, and there was no sign of a source anywhere. Feeling a little uneasy, Margaret took her blanket and cup of tea back into the living room, where she settled down next to Buster once more. She tried to ease her mind, however, she couldn't get the thought of the crying baby out of her mind. It had to have been the wind. There was no way there was a baby out in this storm. That's when it started again. Outside the window, next to her front door, clear as day, it was the sound of a baby wailing. The poor thing. Who could leave an infant out in the cold like that? She had to help it. She jumped out of her chair, startling Buster awake, and began heading to the door. However, before she could reach for the handle, Buster charged up behind her, barking furiously. This wasn't the normal yapping he did when a guest rang the doorbell. It was crazed and aggressive. It unsettled Margaret deeply. Instead of opening the door, she turned back and went to the phone across the room. She dialed the police and told them about the baby crying outside of her house. To her shock, they immediately demanded to know where she lived and told her that she was to, under no circumstances, open the door. This terrified Margaret, but she did as she was told, and within a few minutes she saw several police cars pull into her driveway. Apparently, there had been a string of murders in the area. When the police heard her describe the baby crying, they immediately recognized it and came over as soon as they could. By the time they arrived, there was no sign of the killer. But discarded in the bushes outside of her front porch was a baby doll with a tape recorder strapped to it, playing the recording of a baby wailing. A serial killer had been using this tactic to lure out unsuspecting women who were home alone. And had it not been for Buster, Margaret likely would have been his next victim. The breakdown. This urban legend began circulating around the early 2000s. Although no location in specific was ever mentioned in the story, many believe this to have taken place in the Baton Rouge area of Louisiana. This idea was likely fed by the string of murders in 2002 by Derek Todd Lee. Also, in September of 2002, the show America's Most Wanted aired a segment about the murders, showcasing the use of a tape recording and baby doll. This likely provoked the rumor to spread even further. Yet another mention of this case that likely furthered the spread of the information was the 2007 episode of the TV drama Criminal Minds, in which one of the detectives stated that Derek Todd Lee had used a tape recording of a crying baby to lure women out of their home. There are many variations of this story, as well as multiple real-life accounts where witnesses claim to have been in similar situations. True or not, there is an important lesson to be taken from this urban legend. Always be careful when answering your door, especially at night when you are alone. It's a scary world out there, and sometimes the truth can be a whole hell of a lot scarier than fiction.